Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Lorandom podcast. I'm your host, Peter Bauman, the editor-in-chief of Lorandom, and today I am so lucky to be joined by Loucas Braconnier, or Figure31, and we are discussing and demonstrating his new work, Dell. So I can't wait to share it, and let's begin.
Hey, what's up, Peter?
How's it going? Good to
doing good.
Talk.
Doing good. Very
thank
busy.
you for joining.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this work. So I've seen it all on my Twitter feed for the last couple of weeks. I think anybody has who's been connected to the space recently. And yeah, so maybe we can start with some like high-level questions about your practice and maybe some of your previous work, and then we can really look at Dell and actually look at it and talk about it at the same time. But yeah, maybe we can just start by you telling us how you started thinking about blockchain as a medium. Like, what was that original kind of spark that got you interested? What drew you to Ethereum as this site for art making and also distributed computation?
I started around 2021, but before that, I was already kind of like, lurking around and then exploring like different blockchains and mostly in Bitcoin. But it took me a while to like commit to like making art on the blockchain. I was already in school, in the art school at the time. And there was like a lot of negative sentiment around anything crypto and anything like blockchain related in the field that I was. It wasn't like, frowned upon, but it was not welcome, let's just say. And in 2021, I worked with OXMA, who's in JPEG, where JPEG used to be, a curatorial platform. And we released a collection called Salt. And the initial idea for those was these days we kind of take it for granted that like we have a lot of like dynamic NFTs and dynamic artwork on the blockchain, and like the standards have gotten more complex. People are more used to different expression. But back then it was fairly like a new thing. A lot of the NFTs or the asset on chain were very dynamic, or you had like more raw exploration, like some of the stuff that Ria did early on. But the idea was that the image would keep changing every day. Something would happen to it at one point or another. And that's what really brought me to Ethereum, is to have an artwork that would keep evolving one way or another, or something would change. Like basically you're not getting a static asset, or you're not getting a static artwork. Something happens through time that affects it, and that affects your gaze on that artwork and your experience of it. That's really where it started for me.
Yeah, so you talked about time. Like, what is it? What do blockchains actually bring to your practice in terms of, like, why do you need blockchains in order to have this work that changes over time?
Well, I mean, to be like, if we're completely honest, like technically, blockchain is never like 100%. Something cannot not happen without the blockchain. So there's always this little like caveat that comes with everything. But what it allows is that it makes it public, and it makes it so that anyone can interact with, and it's there potentially, well, I say forever, but for as long as the chain runs, basically. And so it's a shared database, so anybody can access it, anybody can interact with it, and that I think is like the main thing that makes it very unique, and that makes it so like interesting for an artist. So before, where if you were making digital art, you had to rely on centralized solutions to share your art and keep it alive. Now you can, relate that task and that like work throughout like decades and years and whatever, like through a network that's maintained by nodes. And that's what's so interesting. That's what's so unique for any artist, I think. And although it's limited in like the code that we can have, and then the code that we can run, and the different types of interaction we can set up within like a smart contract, it is still very powerful, just because it's public and just because it's shared by so many people at the same time and maintained by like, a whole network of nodes. I think that's like the big strength of Ethereum. And yeah, to go back to the first question, it's what like brought me to this medium. I think I was also very interested by how open source and open everything was. Like, I don't know if you remember, but like in the earlier years, like when NFT kind of started to like come up, it felt there was this great sense of like nobody was really that established except a couple of like older artists. and it just felt like you could just reach out to anyone, and you could like work with different developers, and you could like it just felt so open and very refreshing from what I was used to, like being the more traditional art world, and then going into uni where it was very hierarchical, very like segregated at times. So it just felt like so fresh and so open, and there was this great like projection into time that I like, of like create something and it keeps evolving, even if it's very simple. That like mechanism of evolution, I think, is like at the core of my interest.
Yeah, and that's also, you talked about some of the properties of blockchain that interested you as an artist, and then that led last year, 2025, to World Computer Sculpture Garden. You were part of that project, and that was framed as protocol art, and that project got, it was really interesting work. I mean, I know we talked about it at Lorandom and our end of the year favorite work, and then I think Art Forum had, Matt and Holly mentioned it, or Matt Dryhurst mentioned it in Art Forum too, as some of his favorite work of the year. And so the MO of that project, it was a group exhibition, but it was on chain, and it was treating the blockchain not just as a like image distribution mechanism, but as the material for the art itself. And I guess, can you tell us about the work that you did for World Computer Sculpture Garden?
I did a work called Dear God Layer Approach, and it's like short name is Travelers, but it's about this idea of the machine that forever expands, and the inner space of the machine that like just keeps growing, and then that keeps expanding. So the group show in itself, it's just basically a bunch of contracts that you can interact with. There's no token ownership related to any of the expressions and the artworks in that group show, but in my particular case, it's you register as a traveler on this contract, and then the contract simulates you either moving forward or backward in time. So in every block that you travel, you can just keep it open forever. You can close it to like determine like different lengths of travel. It generates a bunch of data. I'm a bit light technically, and then that data is reused and reformatted into like a sort of landscape that you can generate from the contract also. But it's really, and when we talked about this show with OX FFF, it was really interested in my practice of developing like the inner space of contract. And then as like seeing them as sort of, I guess, like in a bit of a kitschy way, like portals, like, so there's just more to contract than executing program. There's a sort of like, I don't quite know how to explain it. I'm still developing it like in my practice here and there, but I think I'm very touched by like this sort of inner space of like the software, and like it being its own realm, its own world that behave like according to its own rules, and that you can make it grow infinitely. And I think that's just the first work I did, Salt, the growth was limited, the dynamism was limited. It's a massive carousel. So like, every artwork is a window, and then what's shown in that window will like change every day, but what you've seen today, somebody had seen yesterday, and in about 180 days, it will come back to you. So you like share that experience. But in the sculpture garden, it's what's shared is more like marks on the landscape. It's like different little things that like as the landscape is being generated by everyone, they sort of cross over here and there. So you'll see like a little monuments on your massive text landscape that's generated, or when you stop at something, there's a little mark that's left behind, and stuff like that. But it's like the immense growth I'm really interested in, and like what it means for artworks and what it means for us as we experience this space, because it looks so naive and simple from the outside. Often, like, we're seeing a smart contract, and it's just like a bunch of like hard to understand function and code and etc. But there's so much more happening behind the scene, and this is something that I can't wrap my head around it, just how immense the space is behind the computer.
Yeah, and I think visualizing what's behind the scene is also partially must be what was behind the thinking for Dell, and maybe that's the way we can transition to that work. And so I'm wondering, with Dell, how was it in dialogue with that previous kind of protocolic thinking or smart contract protocolic thinking that that you showed with your work on World Computer Sculpture Garden, and then Traveler, and then where might that, does it depart anywhere also from any of those ideas?
I think I'm not exactly sure of the timeline. I think I started to work on it about at the same time that like the garden. I think it was in 2024. I don't end of the year, and I think there's a bit of overlap. Like when I started to work on these, but it's been a rough process working on Dell. So initially, like it just started as like a sort of an experimentation in my terminal from something else I saw, but in terms of like exhibiting the computation, this one is funny because I'm not like, I will say like outright, I'm not necessarily drawn to like these types of like terminal-esque expression. I think part of it is a result of like me being exposed to it so much that I was like, I'm just going to create something out of it. I don't have like a fanatism for ASCII art in general is what I mean. Like, I'm just like, it came out of the process. It's not like a specific design. Right. For Dell, they're dynamic and they keep evolving in the sense that as each time they're read, they're being fed data, and so they keep moving. But their live state is whatever you're seeing right now. So there's no recording. It's not like with with Travelers for the Sculpture Garden, where there's something recorded that you can refer back to. You can look at the history and then you can see what happened, and you can see like, where was this before, and then was there someone else on my landscape, etc. This one is just like a live stage shared by everybody, basically. And the works themselves, they can be reprogrammed and edited. And then, we kind of go back to the original idea of like the blockchain as like a place where like you can come and do stuff, and then it's public and it's shared by everybody. It's maintained by a network of nodes. But the protocol aspect for this particular Dell project, it's really like the idea of it's being fed something from a network that is shared, and then you can affect that expression by like configuring the parameters. And I think that's like the thing that interests me the most. And I was thinking a lot. I was watching a video from a conservator about like using old teacups, and they were like, the conservator was like showing off like this really, really old and fragile tea sets. And they were like, oh, this thing hasn't been used in like 200 something years, and it was extremely precious. There was gold and everything, and like the ceramic was a little like cracked here and there. And they were like, oh, we're gonna make like a special ceremony, and we're gonna use them now. And I thought it was so ridiculous somehow that like this object of like a teacup that is made to be used. Of course, it's decorative and all, and it's made to show off, but it was like remove of time. In like a way, it was removed from like the timeline of like things that we can use, and that things that are are evolving like in time with us. They're like taking it out, and it exists in this weird alternate conservation universe. And then I kind of start to extrapolate for like other artworks, where I was like, it is so new that we can create something, and it's like a machine, it's like a code that executes, and it will potentially execute still in like a decade or in like 50 years, or even potentially like, if the world computer still runs, Ethereum that is, in like 100 years, the code that we put live today would still be executable. There's not that many machines from like 100 years ago that would still work well. There may be like a toaster here and there, or like a oven, or something like a drill, something very simple. But this idea of a machine that's fairly complex, like the software, the code that runs the animation or the smart contract, that like will still be in operation in 100 years, and that we can edit it, and then so we have feedback from like our experience. It's not just like us leaving marks like on the cave wall. Like we have like something. There's something that enters back one way or another, and I think this is so new, and it's very, very clear in my mind that it's like a defining characteristic of like the arts of our age. And it's funny, I say this as like, oh, this is so new and etc. But the way this project looks, it looks like a project could have been made like in the 80s or 90s. It's not like particularly extremely contemporary in the way it looks. So maybe instinctively I had to like go back and then like keep it like fairly limited in terms of expression, keep it text only, and then make it like don't try to expand it too much into like a sort of a visual spectacle that's like too complex or too polished, like other 3D rendering stuff. But yes, I think I've gone off a bit from like your initial question, but like this is my take of like the protocol in the realm of that project, where like it's something that's gonna keep being interactable in we don't know how much time, and that our relationship to it will evolve, and that's just so unique to me.
And to what extent are the assets on chain? Are they stored on chain, or are there like external dependencies? Or
No, everything is on chain. So if I'm gone and dead, everything still works. And everything is there's about 6 contracts for this project that interact together, and they're all somewhat immutable. So if something breaks, I can still repair it, and that's very important because committing on-chain art, it's kind of a lot of work beforehand to make sure everything works, and you have to limit what you can put on chain, obviously, because there's not that much space, and then you have to make stuff like interact together. But just leaving that door open to I can repair it in like 10 years if it breaks, I think that's very important, because there's like RPCs. The RPCs are like what regulates like the data input inside the animation. If those break, I need to be able to change them, for example. If like browsers handle animation differently in the future, I have to change something in there. So it's kept open for that purpose. But everything is on chain. So like the code of the animation, what feeds data inside, and then the image preview, everything like the parameter changes that you can play with, like everything. The website for the project is really just sort of a convenience.
Right. So you were thinking about longevity and with this project and it being able to, that seems to be one of the fundamental things that interest you about working with the blockchain, is how it can serve as a kind of storage mechanism, or maybe not storage mechanism, but a way to continue running code into the future, I guess automatically, in a decentralized way, and it doesn't, permissionlessly. And
well, I mean, when you're putting it on the blockchain, especially for on-chain art, you're committing it to the future. Like we don't know exactly how in 100-year blockchain will exist. Would it just be like an archive that like people read? Will it still be like running live? Will the state and like the way transactional our process has changed? Like will we even have access to like the SS store data the same way that we do now? Like there's no real way. You're just like sort of putting it on the timeline of software advancing in time. And it will survive one way or another. So as long as it's executable in the way that you put it there, it's going to live potentially, and somebody will be able to find it. And so that's very, very powerful. Whereas like if you do a website, or like, you can have like internet archives, like snapshot it, but or like you can maintain it like throughout your life, but there's like longevity is so not guaranteed, if you work that way. But the blockchain is so good for that purpose. Also, it's a bit of a technical flex, obviously, but these days, I think technical flexes have gone like, they're way less important than they used to be, thanks to like new tools that we have available. So I don't consider it that important.
But what were you able to achieve technically by working on this work for 2 years? It was a project that you started 2 years ago, or it was a 2-year process. So can you tell us about maybe why this type of work requires that amount of time?
I think a lot of indecision. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of going back and forth, and like between like this. I was doubting very much in the first place. Like, does it make sense to work on this? Like, this is, to be fully honest, like this is ridiculous. Like, I'm like this. There's like a deformed ball like moving around on my screen. Like, this is completely ridiculous at first, because it's a new branch of work for me. I've not really done something in that realm. But it started as like before sort of the agents were around and they were like very popular. It was like a smaller community of devs like playing around with agents, and I created a custom agent that was like it was a personification of death, of like the Grim Reaper, basically. And we were just like, while I was like working on it and then fine tuning the parameters and all that, it asked for a friend one way or another. Like it asked for, I don't give a lot of meaning to like LLMs asking things, just for the record. But it asked for something, and it prompted me to work on it. And the project started as a C app, which is like a code that's like executable on your machine, and it lived only in the terminal. So for a very long time, I was just kind of like optimizing the way it moves, optimizing like just the engine of it, and then try to like, and then I spent I would say like a fairly long amount of time trying to just port it from the terminal to the browser, and then figuring this out. And this took a long while, because like today it's probably much easier. Like I could probably do this type of work like easily with Claude, but 2 years ago it was still fairly obscure to do that. It's like, okay, how do you do it? Or maybe I'm just not good. Also, that's possible. But it evolved from that, and then I tried to add a lot of mechanism, a lot of different dynamic mechanism, and it always felt forced. It felt like I was trying to like make this too alive one way or another. I was trying to like make this too much of an interaction, but whereas like the animation itself was enough. Like it was enough that it was communicating and like ingesting data all the time, instead of like trying to add. I had like different attention mechanism in the contract before, where you could record the attention you give it, and something would happen, and then you had to like pay attention to it like every certain day in a row, and then something would happen, and then there was like a whole bunch of things I tried to add along the way, and in the end I just ended up shaving everything off, and then just keeping like the animation and the parameter configuration, and I was like, that, that's it, like that's enough. I spent a lot of time also on the colors. That was a big mess. I'm not specifically drawn to these types of color, but I ended up like liking it, and I wanted the project to feel extremely digital. I didn't want to have like earth tone or like softer palettes like this. I felt like this type of the translation from like the terminal to the browser, there's something I had to remain, and so I kind of I was interested in like the terminal colors and like keeping it very bright, and then something that unfortunately doesn't always record well because of the brightness and the saturation of these colors, but it had to communicate like I am a digital thing, and I'm made like to be seen like on a screen, and I don't want to exist like elsewhere.
Yeah, and you kind of call them even bodies for the Ethereum network. Yeah, I wonder what you mean by that. Like, is this in your mind like what the Ethereum network would look like with the body?
I don't know. I think it's what as a whole, I don't have an answer to that. Like I don't know what the whole, like if I had to imagine like the Ethereum network as like a whole thing, I don't have an answer for that. Way too complex. I have no idea. But I feel like you can just kind of plug in it like different expression. I see those. So when I started to work on them, they feel globular. They feel like a little a very small life form, like a small unit. It's not a big thing. It doesn't have like big thoughts, or it can't like reason very in like complex ways. But it feels like it has a bit of a, you watch it move around on screen, there's a bit of liveliness to it. Like I think it's just natural. Like you look at like this type of thing and like I've seen this before. Like our brain naturally associate it to like being alive. But before it was just random data that was being fed into it, and then the application just like keep generating randomness. And then I try to structure that a bit more, so I added like behaviors. So now there's like a behavior system where like it's going to do, maybe like, it's going to try to twirl around, it's going to try to like escape from like the viewport, it's just going to like slap its head around it, or maybe it's going to like meditate and just like twirl around. It's like there's different behaviors basically. And then it kind of felt like, well, obviously this thing looked like it wants to talk back, or like it looks like it's somewhat alive. And then as much as like I kept adding stuff, and then I was like, damn it, like I'm just making a body for something basically. I was trying to make a friend in the first place for like an LLM, which is a bit hilarious. And then it ended up being, I was like, well, I need to use like the input data when there has to be some type, like it can't just like the noise of like the world computer. If you feed it into something and then it becomes coordinated, then I think I would go as far as to like there is some type of expression that is unique to the network. Maybe some people might see just like it's noise that's being fed inside of a machine. That's possible, but I think there's something more ordered that come out of it. So maybe it's like a small type of expression. Maybe it's just like there's this. Do you know? There's James Bloom, Crash Blossom. He did a series a couple years ago. I wrote an essay for him early on, and it was about like gas on Ethereum, and like the artwork reacts to the live gas prices on Ethereum. And so we're trying to understand like what it means if you just have this like random gas value that just keeps going up and how it affects the work. And like, is it just another noise source that you input and you could have just justified it by having a random noise source generate from your browser, right? But then what we kind of figured out is that we're trying to express whatever the ghosts are doing, the ghosts inside the machine. We're trying to give like a voice to like the network one way or another. And we're all trying to do it in different ways. Right now, there's no way, like for live animation, you can't parse exactly. You can't go up the chain of like every transaction within a block and then parse that and then somehow have an animation display like, oh, there was like a transfer here, transfer there, etc. Maybe I'm happy, maybe I'm sad, maybe I'm gonna have a different shape, like express what happened within that transaction. It's too fast. There's too much of it. So we're left with like noise and high-level traces of what happens on the network. So obviously, the expression of that, I think, is going to be fairly abstract and indestructive in a certain way.
Yeah, I think that's a good like transition to maybe starting to show some of the work and
Yes.
demonstrate some of it. So we've talked a lot about the origins and some of the visuals and some of their inspirations. I think, yeah, it's really interesting the idea of a coded friend for an LLM existing in a terminal, and that those are the roots of this work. But yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense in a way when you think about it. And some of the anthropomorphized qualities of the work, which are apparent right away.
Yeah, but it feels blasphemous. Like I feel like I'm like it feels blasphemous. I'm like I can't just give a body to something. Like this is ridiculous. Like it's just like we're projecting so much into the work just because of the way it looked and just because of the way we understand things, which becomes it's not something I'm usually drawn to. I have a much more of a landscape type of like thinking. When I work in my photography work, this feels very object and anthropomorphic, like you said. I feel like it's different.
Yeah, so right away kind of explain what we're looking at and what you're thinking when you decided to visualize it this way.
So that's the main collection. So it's basically just the 256 something outputs, and so you have a little sphere, and they just kind of follow you around, basically. So whether eyeballs or cameras, people have had different opinions. I just like the idea that it's seeking your attention. It's kind of looking for you. It's coming after you. And it creates this nice visual effect over the whole collection. So it's just a quick representation of the parameters of each animation. So you have like the character set, you have the color schemes, and then whichever you click on, then it'll load.
Yeah, it's a really fun way to preview it. Okay, and so then when you click on
there's basic interaction. So like if you drag it, it'll follow you around. Kind of like, but sometimes it resists. It's not fully convinced it want to do like depending on the behavior set. So like in the left corner, you have it. I exhibit what it's doing in real time. So you have like a section for like all the data it's using from like a browser in your computer, and then you have another which is like the data from itself. Basically, it's like what am I doing as like a small entity, and the most important is the BHV, so the behavior, and that's like. That kind of guides what it's doing in any time. So right now it's bouncing around, etc. We might witness the escape one, where it's gonna like try to like smash itself like around the different like corners. But yeah, if you click around, like it'll kind of follow you. It may not follow you. Like it has a mind of its own. Like it doesn't always do what you want it to do. So
the bottom left there, that's kind of the visualization of its behavior.
Yes,
it's different modes.
There's a bunch of data points. I'm not gonna the technicalities, but yeah, it's all in the info section. Yeah. So okay. you have data about like its body basically. So you have like behavior, the number of points. So in the background, it's a 3D object that's being like animated basically, and then after it's being animated, like it's been rendered in ASCII. So there's a real 3D object behind this, like, and there's stuff happening with it. And so you have like a different values that relate to like this 3D object and what's going on with it. So the points would be like the number of points on like the shape. and then you have like a rotation of like that object, because it has to exist within a 3D space. So right now it looks, when you look at this, it looks very 2D. So you might think like, oh, it's just a flat thing that's moving around, and we're like, like modulating how this flat thing, but it's a real thing in like a real imaginary 3D space, and the realm of that space is your viewport. So if you resize your viewport, its realm grows. Sorry, we're kind of lagging because we're on video stream right now, but it has more space to evolve, and it has more space. So you see now it's getting pretty bigger. So it's gonna adapt a bit to its space, and depending on the specific configuration of each asset, it will react to this differently. So there are some like want to really expand, and they'll expand like really complex. I mean, some will say like fairly small, they won't move that much. So they react to the space available to them.
Yeah, it's reactive with that highlights, I think, the kind of the way the project looks at the inseparability of the internet and browsers and blockchain, and like it's a mindset when making work with the internet that I don't know, you're not trying to make an image that's like fighting the internet, or like fighting how to view it online, or fighting how to view it on a browser. Like it's part of the browser itself. And it's
creating within the context of how it's consumed.
Yeah, right.
Or it's made for that purpose. Yeah. Yes, I think it's fair. So much of our interaction are through a computer now, and especially in our space, a lot of it is on a desktop computer, because the way of crypto and like security and all that. Yes, we have mobile for like the normal social stuff, but a lot of it still happens through desktop. And so our relationship with artworks is like, most of the time it's just I'm opening a web page and I'm viewing it. That's an entirely different position than I'm taking the metro, I'm going to like a museum or a gallery, or like I'm going out of town to this specific like art residency spot, and then I'm looking at like what artist did there. It's like, it's just so specific, and I want it to work really well for that. And so it's very much designed to work on your browser and be native to your browser. In a perfect world, it would have stayed a C app, so like an executable like app like on your computer, but there's no way to share that, and there's no way to execute it for everybody like to see it. It would have stayed like just a file that you get. But yeah, I think it takes another meaning by it being like online, being in the browser. But it still like very much emulates the terminal, because I had to make the grid of characters very precise. So the whole site is rendered within a canvas, basically. There's no like, you can't copy text around. It just kind of like everything is very tightly placed, and it's like a perfect grid, just like as if you had a terminal open, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's particularly relevant now with work by Schlums and all the discussion the last like few weeks about reproduction, and I mean, it's a very old discussion. I mean, Art and the Age of Mechanical Reproduction by Benjamin was in the 30s, and so 100 years ago, 90 years ago.
Still coming back to haunt us.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that Schlums was making really interesting points about how AI and copying are again impacting how we see and how we see work, and the difference between a reproduction and an original. But yeah, this sidesteps this completely. There is no reproduction or original when you see it online versus anywhere else. It's always just the original. I mean, unless you were to like video it or something like that. I mean, you're seeing the work.
So you mean you're more like, you're talking about the interaction you have with like it, as in like this is the real thing, and it's always the real thing wherever you open it. This is what you mean, right? Okay,
yeah.
In that case. Yes. So yes, I'd not frame it that way when you first asked it, but yes, totally. Every time you open it, you're having like a real experience with that artwork in its real context. Yeah.
And it's, yeah, like you were saying too, it's never repeating. And yeah, I guess maybe we can also go back to, this visualization. So we talked about the bottom left. What are you showing on the top left there?
So the top left, this is just like the information about that specific asset. So it's just going to be like its configuration and all of those. So the top section, that's like fixed segment. So those are like the ones that I'll be I'm sort of imposing as an artist from like this is you have like a palette selection, and you have like the color initial color set, and then you have the char sets, and then the behavior. So this is the design behavior. In the design behavior, is all the parameters you see here, and these are being plugged into the animation, and they give like any specific asset like its key characteristic. So this one has like a type of elongated shape, and maybe like it'll twirl more than it'll go up and down vertically. Maybe it wants to like go really big, or like it'll contract every once in a while, like becomes really small. It just give its body type basically. It just kind of like this is like how you recognize it other than the color, and how it reacts to input data also. Like, will it change its behavior more often, or will it be like fairly static and then keep it lean? And there's other like stuff that it that relates to the animation engine in there, and how they're ingested.
Yeah, no, why? So this is
And
probably
those are editable by their owner. These are the sets that are editable by their owner. Sorry, I'm keeping it paused because sometimes it's a bit like it's hard to keep a conversation with this thing going in front of you.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm interested in what was the reasoning and the thought process behind visualizing all this information that I guess you would typically, this would typically be information that you would hide, and maybe all that would be visible would be
yes
blob. Yeah, so why show this information? Why make it visible as part of the work?
Well, if I'm making a body for a machine, one of the key characteristics of like a machine is that you can open it up and see how it works, and you can reassemble it and it still works. I can't do that with any living thing. Obviously, sorry, sounds a bit dark, but I just think there's something very specific about machines, and especially like digital machines, where we can expose their train of thought. We can expose their inner computation. Like we can expose inner processes, and we can look at them, and then we can refine them based on like what we're seeing. And that's just something truly unique for like digital machines or software or programs, like however you want to call them. Like there's something that's being executed in real time. So I think it reinforces like this characteristic of what you're looking at, and also makes for a nice spectacle. Yeah. And the right side, like this is just the feed of everything that's happening. So you'll see, for example, like the new transaction hash that are coming in, and then you'll see a bunch of stuff of like how, like where it's going, like what's changing in the animation, like different sorts of randomness, how the hashes are processed. It's not perfect. Like there's not everything that's happening, but there's a lot of things that are happening that are being exhibited that way.
So does what is happening on the right and that the feed or the scroll there, does that impact the animation?
No, it doesn't impact the animation. It's it exhibits what's going on with the animation. So say like, see right now, like I'm using the arrow keys to move it around. So you see the feed on the right side.
Yeah.
So this is like, so it just tells you everything that's going on at any given time. It's just the logs basically.
Oh, so it's the log for this particular work.
Yes.
Okay.
This particular thing, like moving on your screen right now. So it's like it's this very specific del. Like these are its logs, and then they keep track of like everything that happens. So you have a timestamp on the left.
And is that information getting recorded anywhere, or is it just being shown in real time?
It's way too much information. It's just like it's just constantly spewing out like stuff. It's just like blah, all the time. It's like if you open your browser logs and you try to record them, you'd get like, it would become insanely bloated. It would make like it's technically recordable, but on chain like we're way beyond what's possible, because it's like it gets easily to thousands and thousands of lines of like information constantly, and you can see like the transaction hashes. They keep coming because they refresh the hashes. It's 12 seconds per block right now in Ethereum, but sometimes it'll want a bit more information, or it'll store one to use later. And while it's using one, it's going to keep creating others so that it keeps it like in check, and so it can like use it if it wants to change behavior like more often.
Okay, so on each transaction hash every 12 seconds.
No, it's not a transaction hash. It's a block hash.
Block
so,
hash.
So transaction hash is like you specifically doing something.
Mm.
Block hash is just like the whole. It's like, you know, it's much more high level in terms of hash. It's like it's like there's this. It kind of says like this whole thing happened there, you know, kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. I'm starting to understand that more. And then there's other interactive controls, right? Did you want to talk about any of the other ways to interact with it?
I can't show it directly because I don't own any. They're all like I'm trying to maximize like the collectors who get them at the moment. But there's a whole tuning interface. I wish I could show it to you because I don't own any. I haven't pre-minted any of them to myself, unfortunately. But
Okay.
on the wallet page of any owners, there's a tune option, and you go on it, and it's very simple. It looks like this, but there's like the left column is made to like adjust everything. So you can adjust in real time and then test it. And then if you like it, you basically submit it to the chain and it's recorded. And if it goes wrong, then you just reset to original, basically. And the contract, like the tuning contract, it keeps track of everything you do. So you have this nice history of your relationship with that thing. It's not just like a lost transaction hash that like it exists somewhere. I'm recording it and exhibiting it within like the interface. And what you're editing is all these things, like right here that we talked about earlier. So base radius would be like the size of it. So like a 6.5 is fairly big, but it's 6.5 with another, like the settings, they're not all straightforward. They interact together. So it's not just like I make this bigger and then more stuff happen, or I make this smaller and then less stuff happen. Sometimes they'll react to each other in like a multiplicative way.
Right. Okay. So
sorry, multiplication. I mean like basically like they it's not linear is what I mean. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry for my French.
No problem. Okay, so those in the top left, that's where you can, those are actual parameters that you can change if you're
on your own like owner.
Only if you're the owner.
When you connect your wallet. Yeah, only if you're the owner, obviously. Yeah. I wouldn't want, because you can mess them up, like theoretically. Like it's a body. Like if you don't eat well, if you don't take care of it, like it goes bad. So you could like everything works. Like everything's gonna be processed, but you may also break it. You know, it's possible that like you're like if you set like different setting, it's just not gonna work well. Like the engine, like the engine will crash, like whatever. I don't know. I don't really know like the extent. I've tried to balance everything in the collection. And there's about like 20 something different behaviors that I feel like are representative of what I wanted to say with these assets. But some owner may be like, no, I want to take them like in an entirely other direction. And that's fine too. You know, it exists like, at least it would have spawned from something I created. And that still looks somehow like something I intended, but it might become very different.
Yeah, it's part of an artist making work with protocols as you're giving some of the...
You're giving away control and you're giving it to someone you hope you can trust.
Right. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the fun of the protocol. It brings not only interaction on the surface level, like you can, it's following my mouse, but you can actually participate in the final creation of the work. Yeah, I think that's really, I think
that's important. But also like this work, in that sense, like this work doesn't exist until it's open. Like it's not running in the background somewhere and you're coming here to, like I'm not rendering it like on my private server and then you just come in and watch a live stream. Like it's being, how can I put this well? Like, I mean, you could imagine that it's running forever, right? You can imagine it's like it's going something, you're just coming in to visit. That's an interesting thought. I wonder if I could implement that actually. Sorry, I just thought of something. But yes.
So it's something that exists whether you're looking at it or not. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, it's just I'm thinking about the nature of images. You know, like an image is already made. It's there. Like you can argue like it doesn't exist if nobody sees it, but it's defined somewhere in a static form. You know, there's like it's a print, it's a sketch, it's a It's a bunch of numbers on the files, like, that define colors. This thing, it's not like that. It's being realized every time it's being seen. I think we circle back to something you said earlier that we talked a bit about, the reproduction of images and all that.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's also related to the fact that you build these custom sites for your work, and that this is a custom site. Like this isn't on Manifold or Raster or Verse or something like or VVV. That this is custom built, and you've done that for, if not all of your work, I think most of it.
The vast majority.
Yeah. And yeah, why is that important for you? And maybe as a way to kind of close up, as this seems to encompass the philosophy of your practice and some interesting ways.
It's good. I had this discussion with other collectors and creators recently, and I think it's very important to have. Although I really appreciate like the standardization of like contracts and then tokens and like the experience, like there has to be some kind of standard we can rely on. So that we can share. We have, marketplaces, the way they work, and etc. I think having, if we consider the browser and the viewport as like the exhibition space, really, you wouldn't want to have an exhibition space that is almost the same. Yes, like if you go into a white cube, there's pictures on the walls, and maybe they change like every couple of months. But their size, their framing, the height at which they're placed, maybe there's objects in between them, how many are on the wall. These are all very like specific parameters. And a little too often, I find that like we tend to default to like having a framework and then we sell an asset through it. And I don't like being, I respect, I'm not saying this with disrespect. Like I love a lot of the platform and the artists that work with these platforms. It's just I'm trying to imagine, how do I keep this as like a unique experience every time? How, like, if I used to do a lot of installation. Like obviously right now my practice is like all within my computer most of the time. But when you're taking over a space, you want it to be yours. You want it to like define how like the visitor relates to that space. And so it has to be custom every time because it inserts the work. Like it's just like a natural, it's an instinct. And today it's so much easier and so much quicker to do that. I've released a couple of projects in the past weeks, and it's insanely quick how much like you can develop something. This was not possible 2 years ago. And also like, it's probably from like a business standpoint, it's not, would have to generate a ton of sales to be able to have that kind of practice. But today, thanks to new tools, like it's an AI and, assistants and all that, like it's become very much more reasonable, much more realistic to be able to like have a custom experience online for everything you do. And I think we really have to push for it, or else we get a bit like jaded with like, we go to a pace and it just feels like a product on an aisle instead of like an artwork being presented to you. So I'm trying to be sensible to that. But it adds a lot of complexity, and it's a lot more work. It's sometimes I'm getting tired. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, it has these traditions going back to net art of Raphael Rosendahl selling websites.
Oh yes, in that lineage. Okay, this is what you mean.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, but now there's new technologies. There's what blockchain can afford, and you're kind of seeing what artists are using these new materials to make, and yeah, it also
something I'll add is
yeah.
I'm using standard, I'm using like ERC721 ERC721 tokens for these, but in like, we don't have to use those. Also, I've made other projects in the past where I'm just like, fuck the standard. Like, ownership doesn't have to be defined according to like the other parameters that we usually do, because we have to make them interactable, and we have to be able to plug them into marketplaces, and they have to be like aggregated. It's just like, if you want people to find you, you have to make it work like with a certain standard, and then it has to work on a marketplace, and then you need like this and that in your code. Like there's other ways we can just go about it. Like sometimes it's convenient to work with the standard, sometimes it's not. And I wish it was more accepted to like break the standard a bit more, But in certain cases, it's easy to format it and present it that way, and it works very well. It doesn't apply to all works.
Yeah, I mean, the digital and the internet and now blockchains and potentially maybe AI. I mean, yeah, they allow for these ways to bend and shape and mold computation in ways that you really couldn't before. I mean, yeah, like this looks different from a Raphael Rosendahl website that he created to sell. I mean, because yeah, it's using different digital materials and celebrating them. And do you think that I mean, the obvious kind of one emerging technology that's currently dominating discussion is AI? I mean, did you vibe code this project, or I mean, how do you also then see kind of AI impacting the way that we view work natively digitally?
I don't know how much AI affects like the experience like of the artwork. I don't know. I think it affects mostly the creation of it, and maybe it's understand like the way it's shared and the way it's how we understand them, because we have like new tools available, or we don't see like if say you see an image, it's made with AI, then it removes a skill like factor out of the equation. You're not thinking about like, oh, there's a master that did this and like they've spent like years of their life like learning how to do that, which I think is awful for a lot of artists. We sort of like psyops ourselves into thinking that it's somehow great to dedicate your life to make this like one thing and becoming extremely good at it. I come from a lineage of artisans, like craftsmen who've dedicated like decades of their life to like being really good at working with wood and being really good at like doing this very specific thing. And I've seen the impact it has on their lives. And yes, they create these beautiful things, but then I'm kind of like, is this really good? That like we're kind of sacrificing ourselves to become really good when we have this other machine that can just like make it like really quickly and then allow you to explore other aspects of that creativity. I think it's very empowering and it's very freeing, and that we should and a lot of the discussion I see, it's kind of like, oh, if you're if we go back in painting history, when tube paintings came out, oil tube paintings came out, like painters started to paint outside. Like because now you didn't have to like carry your freaking pigments and all your oils with you like at all times. You could just carry a tube, and then that opens up like new expressions. That opened up like different ways to work, and people start to work really fast. And when I think of Monet, Cézanne, like all of those guys, like they were working outside, and a lot of their practice was made possible because of like the new tech, which is tube paintings, which just sound like so like it just sounds so remote. But I kind of feel this is how I approach it, like with the work. So mostly it enables new types of expression, enables us to work in different ways. It does. I don't think it degrades the work in any way.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about if a skill does take a lifetime to master and to learn, there is some beauty in that, but there's also an opportunity cost. You weren't able to master other skills or combine skills, and so it's not that one way is necessarily better than the other, but these new technologies allow us to approach our materials in different ways, or they allow artists to approach their materials in different ways and in more maybe more comprehensive ways. And
because it's so funny you mentioned, we were mentioning Schloms and AI, and then there's been the big discussion about Monet and like the technicality of the expression. So like in Schloms posts, the reactions to them, a lot of them were based on like how technically brilliant the original one is and how untechnically brilliant this like AI version is. It's just a shallow mirror basically, right? Or just like a shallow copy of it. Like there's no compositional intent. Like these things are not placed right. Like the colors there, they don't like evoke like shadows the way they do in like a real Monet. But what I learned about Monet, like if we go back to like the Fauvist, like the Fauvism movement, like it was very like a couple of gestures there, like really thick painting. Like, can you imagine like the way it looked back then when they did that? I just think it's so like the way we view technical achievement, I think it's just irrelevant at this point. Kind of not irrelevant, but it has changed, and we have to perceive these artworks not as like a technical thing that's happening. There's something else going on.
Yeah,
I
there's
personally love it because it creates a lot of space for like being creative and like explore different types of meaning.
yeah, there's more to expression than technical skill. I mean, and we should be happy that painters are not only trying to paint in like photorealism and that they're experimenting and using ideas as the foundation as opposed to technical skill as a crutch. I mean, maybe that's
I don't know,
being
because I have
negative.
I'm talking shit, but I have a lot of love for like these types of expression too, you know. So like,
Yeah,
I don't
and
want to
my favorite
disrespect.
artists. Yeah, your favorite artists, your favorite writers, are sometimes those craftsmen that exhibit the most technical skill.
Yes,
but I think that's
yes.
often because they are also matched with the conceptual, like at least equal, if not greater, conceptual skill as well. And yeah, so it's definitely not like an either or kind of thing. But it's freed artists to not have to rely on technical mastery alone in order to be successful and to be interesting and to say something and express something. Although it helps. But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to say about the work? I mean, I think we've I think
we covered the main point.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is we've reached about the end. I mean, it's really fascinating work. I think it brings up a lot of questions. I mean, we're kind of sitting here denigrating technical skill, but I think it also
I'm not denigrating. I'm not denigrating.
Yeah.
I respect technical skills, but none of this would be possible thanks to a very specific person's technical skill. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're celebrating technical skill, but acknowledging again that it isn't the only thing that artists must rely on these days. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for walking us through this and telling us more about it. I mean, I feel like I could keep watching it all day. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting project. And I'm excited to see how the community responds moving forward with it. And yeah, thank you so much for walking us through it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.